Hi. So let's look at what the answers are to this first exercise. The first question deals with how the information in the cell product or service being delivered best addresses the problem of the wind sway in the zip line or in the cable coming down. And the answer is E, all of the above. Notice it doesn't say specifically that manual control means the operator can account for wind, but because we know the operator can manually account for all the or execute all the relevant commands, and controlling for wind or halting for wind is a relevant command, obviously. Therefore, the operator can do that one. In thinking about the answers here, and also in thinking about how you do new product development, the critical thing is to be able to justify your answer. So in this case, it was a syllogism, that's deductive logic. You might use inductive logic, higher order logic. The point being that it's just got to make sense. You got to be able to justify what you're doing. Okay, the second question says, do we need to revise what's going on in the product or service being developed? And we need to remember who's reading this project charter. It's an internal document. It's designed for management to approve something and to help the team orient itself so everybody's on the same page. So they're basically familiar with what's going on, so we don't have to have reams and reams of paper that's talking about all the nitty-gritty little details. We just got to get in the ballpark, and people can fill in the rest, obviously. So the answer is A to this. It's implied that wind is a concern because it's mentioned in the description and the business case, so we know that it's there. When we come to 3, who is the most important customer, and is emergency users as important? The answer is obviously no, because it states in the targeted customer cell the most important end users are people in apartment buildings and so on. So if you're not reading, you're going to get the wrong answer. So it highlights the importance of reading carefully. Question 4 is a budget question, and how do we determine whether a budget's reasonable? Now, if you've done a lot of similar projects, you can say, okay, let me look at what I've done before, I can make a good guess. But if you haven't, you got to go out and find benchmarks that you can use to figure out what you're doing. One benchmark are R&D awards and product development awards that have been made by other funding agencies to other companies like yours. And so in this case, we're looking at the U.S. Small Business Innovation Program. We're looking at a Phase 1 and a Phase 2 award, which are the same amount of work as is involved in this project charter. That adds up to about $2 million US dollars, which is in the same ballpark as the budget here. So we say, yeah, this is probably reasonable. When we come down to number 5, the success metrics, what are the relevant do we need to include something for a wide range of environmental conditions? The answer is yes, and it's yes for 2 reasons. One, because in the business case, we're mentioning that current systems are not optimal because of rain and snow and other things. And secondly, we've said that this drone is going to be used around the world, which means it's got to be able to function in a bunch of different conditions. So A and B are both correct, which means C is the correct answer. When we come to question 6, the question is, do we need another team in light of all the work to be done, or are these sufficient? And when we look at what we have and we read this article, we realize, no, this is probably sufficient teams, a number of teams. We only want 3 to 5 teams at most. We've got some good functional differentiation here, and the user interface seems to fit nicely within the integration team, so I don't see a reason why we need to add any more teams. Okay, So much for the project charter. Now we're going to questions, that is, for the project charter questions. Now we're looking at action plan questions. The number 7 says, is again, what's going on with the teams? Does this seem to be a good team structure? I just answered that question. So in light of that article and the diversity of skills needed to look at the various functions, because one's mechanical engineering, one's electrical engineering, and so on, it seems like the team structure still makes sense, so the answer is A. When we look at 8, the difference between skills and know-how, this is pretty much a paraphrase of the web link, so you had to read the link in order to get it correct. And if you didn't, you're going to get it wrong. And if you don't know what the difference is, please go back and read that web link. Again, the importance of reading carefully is highlighted in question 9, where we're talking about the kinds of intellectual property protected by registration in Cyprus. Note that you don't register trademarks, so it is not correct. The correct ones are A, B, C, and F, or what those are patents, copyrights, trademarks, and industrial designs. A is answered from what 10 is A from what I just said. It's also clear from the reference that you can read in there. Yes, trade secret is protected in this country. Number 11, if you read the WIPO, how to use the tool, all of those are mentioned. That is the correct answer. If you haven't read it, go back and read it, because you're going to need to know it to take the final exam. And finally, D highlights the importance of also listening to the videos. In the first video, I talked about the importance of going back and forth, how the project charter is not more important than the action plan. These have to dovetail. You have to figure out how to make them work together and play together nicely. So this back and forth, you're looking at a variety of different things to do that. And you, as the project manager, are the final decision maker. That's what it means to be the project manager. So much for the questions. Let's look forward to the next module, which is the voice of the customer. When you're doing interviewing, the key in interviewing is to be able to walk a mile in the other guy's shoes. You want to understand how the world looks from their perspective. And you do this by approaching your discussion with empathy, and you use analogies to your own life sometimes to help explore topics. The other thing you have to remember is your skeet shooting, in the sense that you're leading the market because your product's going to be introduced a year, 2, 5, 10 years from now, maybe longer if it's a drug. So you want to know where the market's going to be then when you introduce, not where the market is today. So you have to think about that when you're asking your questions and having a discussion with people. Another thing you have to think about is sometimes hard for people to give you an actual number. You know, when you say, well, how many RPMs does the engine have to work? And they're like, well, I don't know. I buy a car, I don't think about the RPMs. So you say, how would you figure that out if you wanted to figure it out? And they say, well, or you may give them a couple of suggestions on how to figure out. Would you figure it out by looking, if do you like the power in your car now? Is that good? Yeah, that's good. Okay, so do you know how many RPMs are in your car now? No, but we can. But that would be a good way to figure it out. How many I want? Okay, well we can go to the web and figure out how many RPMs are in their cars today. We don't need them to do that, even if they don't know. So if they can give us a method for figuring out something, that's as good usually as giving us the actual number. But we do always have to give them a straw man typically to get started. And what do you think people would pay for this? Is it like a luxury, more closer to a luxury sedan, or more like a family car? What do you think is appropriate for how we price this vehicle we're going to introduce? Our electric car or whatever. So you can do that. Another thing you have to think about is how you describe things. If you're talking to people who are potential competitors or who will talk to competitors. Suppose I'm designing a new cell phone cover, and I thought I'm going to make it more interesting. I'm designing it for women who just want to have fun, and so I'm going to put some bling in mine, little things to fall down, little crystals on the side. It's going to be very blingy. Well, if I say to somebody, do you think there's a market for a cell phone that's very blingy, and they're a competitor of mine? They go, oh, I didn't think of making a cell phone cover rather. They say, oh, I didn't think of making a cell phone cover with bling. Good idea, I'll go off and do that. So I can't ask the question of them in the same way that I might somebody else. Instead, I might ask the question of, when you are designing cell phone covers, what do you look at? What kinds of things about your customers do you look at that you think are important? Where do you see gaps in the market? Things like that. What problems are you trying to solve for your customers? And that way I'm not giving away the idea of what I'm doing. When you describe whomever you talk to, you never say how you do it. That's your secret sauce. You just say what you're doing. I'm going to make a cell phone cover that's more fun for women. I'm not giving away the sauce of the bling. Or I may say, I'm going to make a cell phone cover that's blingy. If I think that that's safe to say, but not say I'm going to have little crystals and things that float up and down and all of that. Finally, when I'm doing interviews, I always ask, can I call you back if I need a clarification? Usually people always say yes. And the other thing I always ask is, who else should I talk to? And if they recommend some people like Mary and George, I say, can I use your name when I call Mary and George? Because if I can use their name, it's easier to get through and reach that person typically. Couple of other things. When I talk to people about price, if I'm asking about price, I always want to be clear what price means to them. For some people, price means purchase price. For some people, it means life cycle price. That's the purchase price, all the consumables, everything involved in using that, all the way down to paying the garbage people to carry it away when it's done. Other ways to think of price are changeover costs. If I am going from a Microsoft machine to an Apple machine, it will take me some time to learn the new user interface. That's a changeover. How long that takes me will affect how expensive it is. If I value my labor at whatever cost, that's the changeover cost. Another thing I look at is payback period. So suppose the argument is Apple computers are far more efficient than Microsoft computers, or vice versa. Microsoft computers for business are far more efficient than an Apple computer. It's going to, if I buy that Microsoft or Apple computer, Microsoft operating system or Apple operating system computer, I have an outlay. That increased efficiency every time I use it has a value. How long does it take for that value, the amount of money I'm saving by using the more efficient machine, to equal the purchase price of the computer? A year? 2 years? 5 years? That's the payback period. So price can refer to any of those, and you may want to probe for different types of those factors when you're talking to people. Final thing I want to talk about is how markets emerge and the phases of the market and what that means as you think about who you're targeting when you're talking to end users and buyers. So markets tend to have sort of a Gaussian distribution in terms of buying over time. And that translates, if you're looking to cumulative, to an S-curve. At the early stages, you get the innovators. The innovators are the techno-weenies. They buy regardless of what it is because they like the latest greatest. After a while, if it works, there's a gap in here that it could die just from the early, from the innovators. It doesn't appeal to anybody else. But after a while, a new set of customers comes in, and we call these the early adopters. And I write that because these are the most important kind of customer and end user to keep in mind when you're doing your market research on voice of the customer. Because if these people come in, that's when takeoff occurs and the market starts growing rapidly. So if you're looking at market trend data and you see that sales are ramping up very quickly, that's probably because it's in this high growth phase where the early adopters are coming in. And after a while it begins to level off until you get up here, and this is a phase of market saturation. So this is when the jargon is, they say this is when the early and late majority come in, and buying, there is some new buying here, but over time it just becomes replacement buying, and the rate of growth is much slower in this new buying, and then it levels off and it starts to decline as people go on to other kinds of products. There's still some people who buy here, and those are called laggards. But if you see that the S-curve is pretty much flat and not growing, that means, or if it's starting to curve down, the cumulative sales won't curve down, it'll stay flat. But if this one's going down, that means that market's in decline. So that's how that works. Okay, so thank you very much, and now we'll go to the Voice of the Customer module as you go forward, and I'll see you in the next video.